Hello Earthlings, and welcome once again to another YouTubey type thing from me, Roger Yates. So now the volunteer group that I am the organising volunteer for Vegan Information Project has a rather jaundiced view about the mass media. This is one of our badges, and this is one of our posters. And at the same time, you do tend to still get kind of sucked into doing it. And as a sociologist, I know that it's the mass in mass media that is quite seductive for social movements. The real problem for movements, and this was a major problem before the internet, of course, is that you have no control about what they do. So anyway, we were contacted last year, 2017, to take part in a program called What Are You Eating? Now, I didn't know anything about this program, and it's presented by an award-winning journalist called Philip Butcher Hayes, and I didn't know anything about him either. There was some worries from people that it was going to be a bit of a hatchet job, and that's actually what it turned out to be. The guy kind of went vegan for a month and suffered terribly with his health, to the extent that he's supposed to have lost 2% bone marrow and 3% muscle or something, which sounds like almost like an impossible thing to do in relation to 1 month in a plant-based diet. And so anyway, it turns out that he was recommended by a nutritionist or dietitian on the program to take supplements, because, as you know, all us vegans were rattling with all these supplements. I tend not to take them myself very much. My sister, also a vegan from the 1970s, never taken them. You know, I take a multivitamin now and again if I remember. Don't feel any different whether I take them or not, to be quite honest, but there you go. Anyway, he was recommended to take these supplements, and he didn't do that on the grounds that he said that nutritionists are worried at the moment about some young women going vegan or plant-based without really doing much research and without supplementation, and so he deliberately adopted a kind of difficult plant-based diet. And so I suppose, in that sense, the results were kind of predestined in a way. He's also a hunter, this guy, and so in a program about veganism, he still had a dead deer and a dead duck, and had some guy talking about whether human beings or humanity in general had always eaten flesh. And this guy seemed to think that they did, which is a controversial thing in relation to thinking about early humanity. Some people who subscribe to the idea that we're more likely to be herbivores probably thought that early humans might have been scavengers. But even that phrase that I've mentioned before, which I dislike, hunter-gatherer, some sociologists say gatherer-hunter, as it were, to get the quantities right. And a lot of people use the term forager as well. And so we were probably foragers and also scavengers. But that's not really an image that we like, okay? So ideologically, that's not going to wash with us. So, we need to be man the hunter, humans the hunter, but generally speaking, man, it's a gendered position. And often it comes from early anthropology. In fact, I'm going to read you a little passage from Jim Mason, and this, it's a book, full of pages. And I'm going to read from page 73. Yeah, it's got lots of pages. This one's got over 200. Okay. You'll have to Google what a book is, I suppose. All right, so 73. And he's got a chapter. It's called Before Agriculture, A World Alive and Ensouled. And he's got a subtitle called Male Bias. And he says, male chauvinism, as we've seen, has long been at work in the field of anthropology. Male anthropologists have tended to play up male contributions to humanity and to ignore those of the female. Women, they assumed, were too busy nursing babies and tending to home fires to get involved in art, technology and culture. Until recently, for example, male-dominated anthropology had not bothered to study the catalogue of large numbers of grinding stones that women used. The study of presumed male tools, on the other hand, went into obsessive proportions. Nearly everything with a sharp edge was identified as an early great hunter's spearhead. Then thousands of these spearheads were classified into types and subtypes and so on. From this perspective, it looked as if men were sophisticated tool-using and making beings, while women were all thumbs. Lately, better analysis has revealed that many of these spearheads were actually digging, stripping and chopping tools, probably made and used by women. Okay, so that's An Unnatural Order by Jim Mason. It originally came out in 1993. That's a 2005 version. Well worth getting that book. It's really kind of interesting. So this is kind of like a thing that we learn in sociology even, that, the early anthropologists, usually kind of white middle-class men, whenever they did indeed find a sharp edge, they would, they would classify it as a weapon, whereas more feminist-inspired anthropologists looked at the same data, and as Mason says, they found stripping tools and kind of tools for cleaning, or maybe doing things like scraping the skin off a carrot, something like that. So that was another kind of biased aspect of it. So I've extracted out the bit that we did, and so the film crew came to the Vegan Information Project Vegan Information Day on a very, very cold end of 2017 year, and it was actually one of the times when we had a Christmas market there, so you'll see lots of small gazebos in front of our double gazebo. I thought it was worth including this on the grounds that this essentially is about the only part where the vegans managed to say something at all, and obviously me being a rights-based person, I talked about rights violations. So I hope you like this bit. I think it's only about 3 minutes long, but enjoy, as they say.
The core vegan message is that meat is murder, and at the Vegan Information Project's weekly Temple Bar stall, virtual reality goggles are used to give an immersive view of factory farming in the UK and Europe.
It's a short film, and you're in the position of a pig who is in a crate, and then there's a slaughter scene towards the end.
Okay. I'm in a very narrow pen looking at things from the sow's point of view. To either side of me, I can see rows and rows of sows either way. Yeah, there's no doubt about it. The conditions are pretty cramped.
Your next and final stop is the slaughterhouse.
I'd say it's a very, very effective technique for making you think. Typically, what reaction do most people have when they see that?
Usually they're fairly shocked because, it's a kind of scene that they've never really seen before. When they see it in such a visceral way, in the sense that they can actually be there and they can look around, they can see the ceiling and that, and it gives them that real feeling of being there.
And for you, what is wrong about slaughtering an animal?
Well, for me, it would be a rights violation. What do we have the right to do? Do we have the right to control someone else's life from conception right through to slaughter? And the case for animal rights says we don't.
Okay, I suppose my issue with that is that it's social philosophy. That's not the best way of determining how to eat.
I mean, first of all, veganism is a philosophy, not a diet. It's much wider than that. It talks about food security, talks about rights. It's a much broader thing. I mean, everybody in the world could be fed if the world was vegan.
And has it made you think twice about eating meat?
In theory, it would actually, yeah. It's very strong, seeing how it's done there.
It's a lot of difference when you do it with like virtual reality. Disgusting, like.
Having become vegan, how many people are falling away from it because it was a faddish kind of thing, and how many are sticking with it as a lifelong choice?
It tends to be the case that it doesn't really matter why people go vegan initially, but if they don't engage with the ethics fairly soon, then they might get a bit wobbly on it.
Yeah, so that was our bit of the entire program, and managed to get a few points over it. It is edited in a little bit of a weird way. In fact, the way that it works is that they basically had about 6 questions that they asked over and over again over a period of over an hour from different angles. And I remember Butcher Hayes particularly kept saying that, we all die, and so kind of what's the difference? And I kept making the moral point that there's truly an ethical difference between being killed and dying, So I just, he kept repeatedly asking me the same question. I kept answering in that vein. Another thing I ought to clarify, I suppose, from VIP's point of view, is that they did use footage from Animal Equality, and obviously it's Animal Equality footage that is on the VR goggles that we do use in Temple Bar Square. Now, I used to know the people who founded Animal Equality in Spain, Sharon and Jose. They've kind of gone a bit careerist and gone to the States, and I just wanted to mention that we don't approve of the fact that Animal Equality have recently had a $500,000 grant from the Open Philanthropy Project in order to do cage-free campaigns. So we don't approve of that, which is, makes kind of supporting them far more tricky, not least also that they seem to have kind of joined this effective altruism kind of move within the movement, which is a bit of a con as well. So that's just something I thought I need to clarify. Okay, so that's us done then, and I hope you enjoyed that clip, and see you next time. Bye.